Hi, John. How are you today?
Good, Elliot. Welcome back. Hope you had a great family event. I know you were gone for a bit. Joe filled in admirably as he always does. He makes both of us look better because he's so good.
It's true.
So we're happy to have, but I'm glad you're back.
Thank you. I guess it was quite an interesting trip, and but glad to be back. We were gone about a week, and I listened to last week's episode, and he does make he makes both of us sound better when whoever he's working with.
Absolutely.
So,
All right, there's a bunch of
yeah,
stuff.
bunch
Oh,
of
it's
stuff.
all over the lot, and I might add a thing or two that's come up since this morning.
Okay.
But I thought because we've spent so much time talking about FATF mutual evaluation, which the U.S. in-person meetings have ended, so obviously waiting on the report, that the Italian evaluation was posted. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So there was an indication in the report that there's always a concern, a little bit of, I guess, warning maybe in the wording about the high risk of organized crime. I know that historically we've thought of Italy as the home of organized crime, but it's so global now that I think it's more than just Italy. And they talked about the risk from both domestic mafia type organizations and other criminal groups that operate internationally. But generally speaking, the report was very positive, talked about strong understanding of money laundering risks, as well as strong cooperation to address them. They, again, coming back to the criminal organizations, talked about the fact that they continue to use complex and opaque ownership structures to conceal the proceeds of crime, and noted that Italy has put in place measures to mitigate these risks. It did note that sanctions for breaches of beneficial owner obligations are not sufficiently, they're not being effective in terms of dissuading people from using them. The United States figured that out and just decided not to worry about them at all. So, and like everybody else, they have a roadmap of key recommended actions that have to be taken care of over the next 3 years before their next mutual evaluation. So, all in all, I would say positive report. If the United States gets that report, I'd be quite surprised, but somebody would be happy in Washington.
The European Union adopted the 20th Russian sanctions package. If you remember, there's been a long internal debate and deadlock because of vetoes by Hungary and Slovakia. Obviously, the change in government in Hungary is very positive on a number of levels. The package reflects the EU's continuing efforts to tackle sanctions circumvention with additional measures targeting third country parties, the activation of anti-circumvention tools against Kyrgyzstan, an extension of a list of goods and technologies subject to the prohibition on transit via the territory of Russia. Several other takeaways include financial and crypto asset restrictions have been expanded, including a transaction ban on additional 20 Russian banks that's effective in early May, and a new prohibition targeting specific crypto assets. So that was a major move by the EU just late last week.
Yes. And they also, in there were some additional things related to restricting Russian access to energy resources from coming out of the EU, which have been included in most of the packages. But I think each time they come up with another one, they fine tune based on where they see the leakage. So,
The organized crime and corruption project, reporting project, which we talk about frequently. Again, if you're not already subscribing to their free newsletter, you should. But a number of announcements that they made last week, just want to quickly highlight, but you can get the detail from their weekly. One is a Moldovan oligarch has been sentenced to 19 years for crimes including $1 billion bank fraud. A panel of judges in the Moldovan capital said that that individual, quote, created and managed a criminal organization, unquote, that oversaw fraud, money laundering, and financial theft from the banking system. And that was from the anti-corruption prosecutor's office there. In addition to that, another noted part of the weekly was that France has opened up a criminal inquiry into Lebanese banks over capital flight. So there's a criminal investigation into the illegal transfer of funds out of Lebanon that's been launched by the French authorities, targeting the European subsidiaries of major Lebanese banks, including Bank Audi, Banque Richelieu France. That's in there as well. They do have a story in the OCCRP weekly about what Joe and I talked about last week, and that's the House Financial Services vote to basically dismantle the Corporate Transparency Act. So there's an updated story in there. As we said last week, still has to go to the floor and obviously the Senate. So a lot more activity has to occur before those potential changes happen. So again, a couple of excellent reports. And the last one related to the OCCRP, they highlighted the fact this just came out that a resolution passed by the Council of Europe's parliamentary arm has accused Swiss authorities of allowing millions linked to a Russian embezzlement scheme. So it's a human rights body that criticized the Swiss authorities, accusing them of what I just mentioned. It was a 43-7 vote. And that's the latest chapter, as the story goes, the decades-long fallout from the Magnitsky affair. And you could read that information in detail on the OCCRP website.
And you mentioned France opening an investigation. France has also issued a fine against MoneyGram, the funds transfer firm, of 1.3 million euro for AML failings. The Financial Supervisory Authority in France, which is embedded in the Bank of France, imposed the penalty following an investigation into the company's compliance systems. In its rulings, the regulator identified weaknesses across several core controls, including ineffective transaction monitoring, gaps in customer due diligence obligation, misclassifying customer risk, problems with internal control systems, and weak enhanced due diligence, which in the US we'd say that was a general program failure, that
Right.
list. And MoneyGram, for those of you in the US, you'll recall that there have been previous issues with MoneyGram going back actually a number of years. Not all the time by any means, but it's a big, sprawling or international organization, and they do seem to struggle a bit with keeping everything on the up and up.
Do you want to talk about prediction markets, something that's in the news quite a bit?
Yes. So the CFTC has sued the state of New York. They filed suit last week. Um, And so CFTC is the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and they're accusing the state of invading the CFTC's authority to regulate prediction markets by filing these lawsuits. The CFTC is alleging that it intrudes on the exclusive federal scheme Congress designed to oversee commodities derivatives markets, including prediction markets. The CFTC has determined and has been treating prediction markets as what they call event contracts and not gambling. So this is all tied up in the fact that many states who have gambling regulations, and a number of them, and I believe Arizona and Illinois, were sued by the CFTC earlier this year for the same issue. The states are looking to regulate these prediction markets as gambling, and the CFTC says, no, they're a derivative product, and therefore we have exclusive jurisdiction. I don't think we've had any court rulings yet to clarify, but I think in the end, the definition and whether the CFTC has exceeded its authority in creating that exclusive definition will be how it will be decided. And I don't know, all the CFTC cases are in the federal court. Whether they'll all get combined or not, I don't know. So, but it's interesting. I mean, the first time I saw a Kalshi ad on TV, I was watching a basketball game, and I thought, how is that not gambling? That was my immediate reaction. And then I, went online and did a little looking. And I haven't done it for a long time, but I used to do a little derivatives work on swaps and stuff like that. And I was trying to figure out, does it really work? But
It's amazing. Yeah, it's incredible. And since we're talking about the prediction markets, I will just say my opinion is some of the things that you can actually bet on are very disturbing when it relates to war, when it relates to um, whether or not regimes are going to change, that sort of thing. And given that, it was interesting to see while you were away, a U.S. Soldier was accused by DOJ, that alone was surprising, of using inside information about the capture of Maduro to win $400,000 on the prediction market. This particular case, the defendant pled not guilty today. His name is Gannon Ken Van Dyke. He's an active duty soldier who was actually involved in the planning and execution of the U.S. operation and used his access to classified information, at least that's the charge, to place a series of polymarket bets on Nicolas Maduro's future. And he actually went as far as to change, and I don't know the technical name, to change his location to be an overseas location when he's a U.S. based citizen. So he was able to place the bet, disguising the fact that he was a U.S. citizen, that he was doing this overseas and using another name. So it seems it's going to be interesting. They certainly asked the president about this, and he equated it to Pete Rose betting on baseball, which I can't begin to try to understand that analogy. But let me just say that I think, and I will bet, I don't know if you can bet this on Polymarket, that this person will clearly get pardoned. So let's see what happens.
Okay. Well, I don't know what it would cost to make that bet, but it doesn't cost anything to
Really?
place that bet with me.
I wonder if it's already on Polymarket.
Oh,
That would
could
be
be.
interesting
I
to see.
guess as I indicated, I've done a little sleuthing, but I have not gone on to Polymarket or Kalshi just to see how they work or from a platform perspective.
All right. Well, since we're mentioning the Department of Justice, let me also mention that Reuters came out with a story about a week ago that DOJ leadership cut more than 4,000 employees from its law enforcement agencies. Notably, in the most recent congressional budget request for the National Security Division, which that division alone has lost 38% of its employees, DOJ pointed to, quote, unprecedented personnel constraints, unquote. And that becomes interesting when DOJ is the leaders behind eliminating these jobs. And I also read today that I don't know that the tax division is closed, but I did see something. It was on LinkedIn from a media source that said that there's been a substantial reduction, if not elimination. I don't think elimination, but at least a reduction in DOJ lawyers in the tax enforcement division. So quite a bit of activity going on there. And I think, again, a Reuters story, take a look at it when you get a chance. They claim it's an exclusive. So obviously they have some quotes in the story, some people on the record. But the bottom line is those are factual. Those are facts. The 4,000 employees that have been eliminated. So again, it becomes interesting to follow this going forward. And I will just say, given that, we also, right before we recorded, the Justice Department was able to get an indictment against James Comey after failing on their first indictment. This indictment, from what I've read, is based on some Instagram post that he put up. Let you read about it. The fact that they got this indictment is, I know they say you can indict a ham sandwich, but this seems really, really fascinating to me. But that and the indictments or the criminal investigations of John Brennan, a lot of what's going on is troubling to say the least.
Agreed. Anything else?
Good question. Oh, I did see one other item still sticking with the U.S., and that is that a lawyer who is also a commentator, her name is Katie Fang. She has filed a lawsuit let's see where she filed the lawsuit.
I think it was in the district court in
US
DC.
Yeah, DC, that's right. 15-page lawsuit specifically against the acting attorney general, Todd Blanche. And this is for failure to release the remaining 2 million plus documents of the Epstein files. And what she is alleging are illegal redactions. So it's interesting. This is a journalist suing the Department of Justice for breaking the law. Anyway, so that was just, I think she did it a few days ago, but I just caught wind of it in a report that I saw today.
Yeah, I do think it was either filed yesterday or maybe last Friday. So very recent. John, I know you're working on our May webinar. You want to talk about that?
Right. Right now we're efforting panelists for a webinar that's going to cover financial access challenges globally. And obviously we've talked about that issue. I certainly have interviewed people for AML Conversations, and Elliot and I have discussed this at This Week in AML. But these will be a global look at access issues for a variety of organizations through either traditional financial institutions or other types, and sort of what are the strategies, what are some of the legal restrictions, what needs to be done to improve access so that regardless of risk, if an institution believes it can mitigate or manage that risk, that they should be able to pursue those particular activities, those particular accounts. So that's we'll have that on the last Thursday in May, and I should be able to firm up the panelists the next couple of days. I also should say we've posted last week an interview that I did with Paul Camacho. Paul is a former IRS CI SAC who has been in the gambling gaming industry for almost 10 years, maybe going on 12 years, and a very passionate believer in training. He is also one of the founding board members of the Mob Museum in Vegas. I think you'll find that interview very interesting. And then we're also going to have another conversation with Sarah Beth Felix, have her kind of revisit April and see what some of the high points and issues that she saw in April. And we're working, we'll post that next week sometime.
Yes, and just for clarity, the webinar in May is May 28th. It'll live stream starting at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. The time you hear this, you should be able to register for the session at our website. And last month's, which live streamed last week, should be up on the website, the recorded version, by the time you hear this as well. So, John, you have a really good rest of the week, and I will talk to you next week.
Stay safe. Take
You
care.
too. Bye bye.